Welcome to Minnesota Legislative Report, the region's longest-running public affairs program. Legislative Report is a weekly review of activity at the state capitol featuring lawmakers from northeastern Minnesota. Most importantly, it's an opportunity for viewers to call or email their legislative questions and have them answered live on the air. Minnesota Legislative Report starts now.
Hello and welcome to a new season of Minnesota Legislative Report. I'm your host, WDSE News and Public Affairs producer Greg Grell. Today's show marks the start of the 45th season of Legislative Report. It's the longest running locally produced public affairs program in our region. Now just 3 weeks into the shortened 2016 session and it's already crunch time. Legislators got back from their back to business Tuesday following a short break for Easter, and the first committee deadline happened on Friday. Today is your opportunity to call in with questions about the legislative session to the lawmakers that represent you. We have two phone numbers. Locally, dial 218-788-2844, or if you're calling from outside of the local Duluth calling area, use our toll-free number, which is 1-877-307-8762. When you call, a volunteer will write down your question and bring it to me here in the studio. You can also send your question in an email. That address is askmlr@wdse.org. The phone numbers and email address will be on the screen for much of the program, and we'll get to as many of your questions today as time allows. Now let's introduce the legislators who are here in the WDSE studio today. To my immediate left, it's Representative Mary Murphy, Democrat from Hermantown. Welcome back, Representative Murphy.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
And Representative Jennifer Schultz is here as well. She's a Democrat from Duluth, and good to see you again, Representative Schultz.
You too, Greg.
Let's just start a little bit talking a little bit about, we mentioned the shortened session, and it's kind of put everything into a tighter time frame. How have things been going so far, Representative Schultz, with that really kind of condensed schedule?
It's been really, really busy because we're trying to get as many bills heard in committee, and we're meeting more often in committees, and we have less time to meet with constituents, but the time we do have available, I'm meeting with constituents and advocates, and I'm having to actually step out of committee hearings more often than I did last session to meet with people that come to the Capitol from Duluth. It just seems like we're trying to cram everything in, and I think so far, in committee hearings we've heard about 200 bills, and only about 10% of those bills are DFL authored bills.
Well, one of the things also that happens is maybe people don't realize that there are also meetings that happen before the session. There's committee hearings that happen outside of the session. So there has been some groundwork laid before the session actually begins.
Yeah, so I serve on state government finance, and we traveled across Minnesota to talk to veterans, to learn about veterans issues. So that happened before the March 8th start of the session.
Now, Representative Murphy, for people who maybe don't follow the legislature as closely as we do here on Legislative Report, explain why the shortened session. What's happening at the Capitol that's requiring this shorter session?
Well, part of it was that the Capitol is over 100 years old, and it is being restored to its original grandness. And there's so much work on the Capitol inside and out that they couldn't have it meet the timelines that had to be done if it was open for the second year as long as it usually is. But, and that's too bad. It's worth the sacrifice, I think, but nevertheless, the people's accessibility to the legislative process is greatly limited. We did not have part of January and all of February to ease into this session, so to speak, because what we had been doing traditionally. And so we found that there were many days on the Hill, like one day there were 16 days on the Hill. And so that meant all those people were compressed in the state office building and the new Senate building, no access to the Capitol whatsoever. And it's sometimes, that day in particular, it was a little scary because you couldn't get up and down the stairways, nor could you get on an elevator. It was just so packed. And so they condensed all those days on the Hill into the 3 weeks that we've just completed.
And by Days of the Hill, you're talking about lobbying visitors?
That's correct. And that's not the day that all the Duluth people were down for Lake County and St. Louis County and Duluth days. But, that even on that day, they had 200 and some people between the two buildings and trying to access and then their night reception in downtown St. Paul. And they came and they were so well prepared, and they met all their commitments and their appointments that they had made months previously. And it was very well done. Many legislators commented on how great all the people were that they met, and there was a good collaboration of people working on various topics. Most of it was bonding projects, but some of it was legislation. And they're the gold stars to be following. Last week we had Mankato on the Hill, and that was over in the Senate building. And I bet they had as many people there as receiving their goodwill as Duluth did for their Duluth days, and it was impressive. And they were impressed with the Senate building too. But we are working with the schedule. We are working with the restoration schedule, and although it will be open for next year's session, it won't be completely completed, but the Senate this year is meeting over in one of their hearing room, what will be a hearing room in the temporary Senate chamber, which will be open next year for the Senate to work into. So progress is being made every day in the construction, but some days progress in the legislation isn't going as fast as what we would like. As Representative Schultz pointed out, by now they should have, since we're past the first deadline, they should have targets, and we don't have targets. One thing that I would like to remind the listeners of is that any bill that was still alive last session is still alive this session. And so some of us that have bills that were temporarily laid over, the temporary is still continuing. And so we would like less temporary and more realism. And it's coming along slowly, but that in addition to the over 1,000 new bills, we're up to the 3,000 something or another in numbers, and so certainly they all won't be there. But the tax bill is still alive. The transportation bill is still alive, even though both committees have been exploring other things to add in.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that, from what I hear, progress is being made, but as I said, it's slower than we would like.
And in my committees, we're hearing bills that don't have Senate companions. So I feel like we're wasting a lot of time, that we could be hearing relevant bills that have Senate companions that are going to move through both chambers through the process. And picking up where Mary left off, it has been so busy at the Capitol with all the advocates coming, which is great. But many times the cafeteria that serves the whole Capitol complex, they're running out of food. So there'll be long lines, and so now I see advocate groups bringing food to the Capitol.
Pack lunch.
Yes.
So we talked a little bit about that access issue, and obviously that will be much improved when the Capitol is improved. But Representative Murphy mentioned that the work being done there is restoring the Capitol, is really bringing it back to its original grandeur. It's going to be a beautiful site when it's done, Representative Schultz.
Yeah, it is really gorgeous. So they've taken some of the scaffolding away from the Capitol, and you can see the beautiful white and cream marble, and now they're working on the dome. And we're still meeting in the Capitol, and we're in the House chambers, and we have to walk through construction sites, and the air quality isn't that great. But it's going to be a beautiful space for the public to come. So there's going to be a larger cafeteria and more public meeting space for when people do want to come and spend time and meet with their legislators.
All right, and we are starting to get some questions now from viewers who are watching this afternoon. But before we get to the questions, Representative Schultz, one of the big stories this week in Duluth was over the potential sale of the old Duluth Central High School site to a company that would have basically owned the building for the Edison Charter School. That was the negotiation, or the ability to negotiate, was voted down by the school board this week. But you and Representative Simonson have some potential legislation about this. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So Representative Simonson is drafting legislation which I'm going to support. And really, we're not opposed to charters at all. As an economist, I like the competition, and I like for individuals and families to have choice. But what we want to do is make it an even playing field. So charters get taxpayer public money from the state, and they also get amount of money for the lease for the buildings. And so we want to make sure that it's an equal playing field, that it's fair, and that since they get public subsidies and public funding and taxpayers are paying for it, we want to make sure that their boards that govern the charters are accountable to the public. Because we just spent a long time in our community trying to determine how many high schools we needed, what the capacity was, and we closed a high school. So I think we have to have another conversation publicly to publicly elected representatives, so we make sure we have the right amount of space in terms of number of high schools. And really, this affects more Representative Simonson's district, because I think it'll pull more students away from Denfeld. But we just want to make sure people are accountable, that discussions are publicly held, and that we try to the financing is fair. Because a lot of people don't realize this, but the school district, ISD 709, pays for the busing out of their funding, and it pays for counselors and other services that the charters use. So we're going to investigate that and try to come up with bills to make it fair and competitive across charters and public schools.
Mr. Murphy?
Representative Simonson also, this isn't new with him. This is come out of a series of gatherings that he had held over the interim at Lake Superior College with the charter school, people that are interested in charter schools, and the people that are interested in public school administration. And so we attended those meetings. I think there were 3 or 4 meetings, and he had, for each meeting, he had a pre-announced agenda, and he set out questions that we should have answered. And sometimes we got the answers to the questions, and sometimes we did not. The charter schools that were invited didn't seem to want to share as much information as we were asking for about their accountability. But they were very good sessions in that we talked and we had real discussion about what they were doing and where they were going. And I think it was, at least we understand how people are thinking. The people that were there that were sharing were thinking better, and we have a better understanding of that. And so it didn't start from a void.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of letters to the editor in the Duluth News-Tribune supporting the sale of the old Central to Edison. And my concern is that preferably I'd want to collect tax revenue on that property. And if we give it to another school, it's tax exempt. Right. And I think that land is going to appreciate in value, because there's just not a lot of land within the city that's buildable that you can develop.
With a view like that.
With a view like that. So I think we should take our time and not rush it. And I am very optimistic that we will get a developer to buy that land, and we will work with the county and the city to make sure we can do that quickly, and that we have the infrastructure and roads to make it more accessible.
And I know that we had some school board members on our Almanac North show this week that both talked about it took some time to get that parcel ready to be sold because of some of the zoning requirements and so on. And now a lot of that is in place, so they're hopeful that they can move forward quite quickly.
Yeah, and I'm pretty optimistic that we can find a developer. I know I spoke to some at the Duluth St. Louis County Days at the Capitol, and I think things are going great for Duluth. We just have to continue moving forward. The
economy is improving as well. The timing wasn't the greatest at the time when the property first went up for sale. So we do have a question from Candace in Hermantown, and Representative Schultz, I'll bring this one to you. Her question is, what's happening with the possible bill that would eliminate the lien on estates for seniors over 55 on Medicaid? That was an issue that came up this year. Some people found large liens on their property because of their being on public assistance for Medicaid.
Right, so there are bills moving through both the House chamber and the Senate chamber, and those are moving through, so I believe that we're going to be successful in eliminating that liens for those age 55 and older. And that was just an oversight that we were not aware of, legislators, that was happening, that Department of Health and Human Services was actually putting those liens on. They knew what they were doing, but they weren't reporting that back to the legislators. So when that came out publicly, that was news to us that was happening. We knew it was happening for nursing home care, and that's a federal regulation, but we didn't know that was happening for those who are younger, just for their medical services.
Was that a result of the MNsure legislation, or is that a separate issue, the liens?
That was a separate issue.
Okay, because I think in some places it was kind of tied into MNsure as if that happened because of the MNsure law, but that it wasn't the case.
No, it wasn't.
Okay. And speaking of MNsure, the MNsure insurance program has had some more issues, some problems, including not getting tax forms out in a timely manner. Representative Schultz, I know you're real concerned about health care. What's your kind of take on MNsure, where it's at right now, where you would like it to be, and is it succeeding?
We're definitely doing well as a state. We've lowered our percentage of people who are uninsured from about 8.5% to 4% since 2013. So we're doing really well getting people insurance. MNsure did have some problems getting these 1095A forms out, and that's because the information they were given from Treasury and Revenue was incorrect, and they didn't want to send out incorrect forms. But that problem now has been resolved. Everyone should be getting or have gotten the last week all of their 1095A forms so they can file their taxes. They just didn't want to send out incorrect information, have people refile and correct their tax forms. So we did hear about that in committee, and Representative Greg Davids, he's the chair of the tax committee, he wanted to penalize MNsure about $13 million. Well, that would be coming up from taxpayers, so I don't think that was a very smart decision to do that. And we realized last week that they had 93% of the forms sent out already. So they assured us that would go forward and not happen again, that they would work with Revenue and make sure that they automated the system and had correct information. But MNsure overall, they've had some IT glitches, but people have to realize that, the decision was made to use private IT consultants, and those IT consultants, they couldn't put together an IT system without flaws. And so Minute, the Minnesota state agency, IT took over and had to fix those problems and do workarounds, which is hard to do in a timely fashion. So I think it's really a software problems that they're fixing, and most people are getting insurance. I'm trying to work on making it more affordable because we still have high deductibles. A lot of people are buying the bronze policy that has high deductibles and more cost sharing, and we really need to lower that cost sharing and lower those deductibles. So I support and have introduced bills like making CGIP, the public state health insurance program, making that a public option available to any Minnesotan who wants to enroll. And there's another bill making Minnesota Care a public option on the exchange. So we're trying to come up with different models to make health insurance more affordable. And in the future, we're having conversations about contracting directly with providers and bypassing health plans, which we think will also make it more affordable and get more discounts.
Representative Murphy, you've been a lawmaker for a long time. What have you heard from your constituents since MNsure went in, and do you think that it's been an effective plan?
I think it has been an effective plan because of just what Jennifer said, was that 50%, we're more than 50% more people are being insured. Of course, when you think about what's happening everywhere, Healthcare is an issue across the nation, not across the world, but across the nation, because healthcare is tied to your employment in most cases. And then like in Minnesota, we have the other cases for all Minnesotans can come too. One day we will have single payer. I'm confident of that. But until we get to there, these steps are making things better. But when people do have a problem, or their insurance doesn't cover, or I had a constituent a couple of weeks ago who went and his spouse had surgery, but they thought that nobody said anything, that they were covered because they had insurance, but where they went for their health care for the surgery, they didn't have that program of insurance, and they didn't catch it until after it was over and the bills had been sent. Mm-hmm. And then there was no appeal. And when something like that happens, then people are upset and they're angry and they're hurt, and they thought they were making the right choices. And we need more opportunity for people to get glitches out of the way before they happen, before the costs are even higher than what they thought. And then they have to develop new worries. And worry and stress doesn't help you recover. And so we're making great progress, but we don't have all the glitches worked out. And a lot of it is, as Representative Schultz has said, is technology differences. And technology, we're relying on technology for so many things, but so many of the people that are subscribing for the insurance or for the care, they're not up to the modern technology standards that everybody expects they know. Mm-hmm. And that is the problem, and that will continue to be a problem for a generation, mm-hmm. at least in part.
Representative Schultz, the point about the technology and maybe a lot of things being available online, but not everybody having internet access or being internet savvy, so to speak. Do you see a gap there, and is there something that the state might be able to do to step in to help alleviate problems like that?
Yeah, the state has funded navigators to help assist people. So we have sites at the library, at Community Action Duluth, and across the city to help individuals enroll in health insurance through the exchange. Mm-hmm. And so even some insurance brokers are doing it to help people. And so the goal was, in some communities they went door to door to try to identify individuals who weren't insured to help them get enrolled. So there are a lot of great resources, especially in our community, to get people assistance to enroll. And it is complex. It is complicated to enroll in health insurance. It shouldn't be that complex. We can make it much more simpler, and hopefully in the next few years we'll work on that. And I was part of this healthcare finance task force, and we came up with 33 recommendations to make it more seamless and easier to enroll. And so far in the House, the Republicans are only hearing one of the bills that I introduced, about 10 of the recommendations. So that's really unfortunate that they'd rather kill the exchange and MNsure by taking away the financing for it and depleting their revenue sources than trying to fix it and make it better.
Was that committee that you served on, was that a bipartisan committee?
It was bipartisan. It had 29 members, a few legislators,
mm-hmm.
people representing every group, stakeholders from health insurance plans, provider groups, advocates for people who are uninsured. And we came up with good bipartisan recommendations that we voted on.
And that was you toured the state, and you had listening sessions.
We did. We went all over the
you
state.
Went hours and hours
mm-hmm.
and hours.
It was a lot of time off session to do that. I was down in St. Paul every week.
So it's frustrating that there's still political divisions over this, obviously, and that's not allowing some of the fixes to take place.
Yeah, it's a campaign year, so they're trying to make an issue, and they're thinking, how can we use this as either negative literature or attack the other party? And they really want to bash MNsure. Mm-hmm. And, they look around the country, and unfortunately that's been an effective strategy. But, Democrats, they want to fix things and make it better and make it more accessible and more affordable. We have a good programs in Minnesota, and we were at the forefront of healthcare reform. We want to do that again and be innovative and get people the healthcare they need.
All right, we have a question from Larry in Hermantown, and Larry wants to know, Representative Murphy, is the legislature considering using the sales tax to supplement or replace property tax so that seniors can have their property tax frozen? I think this question comes up every year.
I think it's discussed most every year, but since we didn't have a tax bill last year, I don't think it's going to happen this year for sure. Sales tax, in Hermantown, they have a 1-cent sales tax, and that's paying for the infrastructure for sewer and water in Hermantown. And for the most part, and the county has a sales tax for gas, which is fixing roads, and the state has the sales tax for many uses, and I'm not sure a sales tax is so fair to expand it even more. And property taxes are the mainstay of the school buildings in the district.
Right.
And I'm not sure that we could go to a sales tax and have the same kind of investment from the citizens in that particular area. I think it would be more of extending the haves and the have-nots, with the metro areas very easy to do it, and the rural areas where they have to go, where the school districts are so very big in northwestern and northeastern Minnesota, and down through the Red River Valley down to the southern Minnesota. A sales tax just wouldn't help them substitute for property taxes for their local school districts. More investment now. If the state could take over all the costs of school districts, that would be another thing. But we haven't made progress on that in this century.
Well, I think we are hearing bills where they would reduce the state tax on Social Security income by increasing the threshold, the amount that's not taxed. So that may help. And then
and that is in the tax bill from 2015.
And I think the governor might support that. And then the other tax break would be for veterans who own a home get a larger tax break than those who rent. So we're going to look at trying to equalize that.
And one thing to be clear too, of course, the property taxes are local taxes. They're the city, the county, and the school district.
Right.
The state has influence. Obviously, you can make policy, but that is still a local tax that your local entities are dealing with.
And another thing is that local government aids come from the state to the city and county, but not to the school district.
Yeah, and in the governor's budget, he wants to increase LGA, local government aid, and county program aid to help with our infrastructure needs.
All right, well, you are watching Minnesota Legislative Report. Want to encourage you to call in or email your questions for our local lawmakers here who are sharing their afternoon with us today. Representative Schultz, we don't have anybody that sits on the Transportation Committee here right now, but this is kind of a statewide issue. There was another train accident in Minnesota this week. We've been dealing with different things like trains carrying oil, accidents within city limits. There seems to be some movement now to put some more constraints on some of this, and that the legislature might act in some way. What are you hearing? What do you know about potential changes that could make railroads a little safer for communities?
Yeah, so where the trains cross roadways, and we have a lot of those in the state, there are several bills by DFL legislators that want to make it more safer at those road crossings, and that would be to regulate the trains and what they can carry and what speed they can travel, what time they can go through. So I'm not sure if those bills are getting heard in the House. I'm pretty sure they're getting heard in the Senate. There's just been a lot of reluctance to regulate rail to make it safer, and we've seen these accidents, and they if they're carrying some toxic substance that's airborne, people have to leave their home and their neighborhood for weeks. And we just want to make it safer. And we're more reliant on train right now to transport oil until the pipelines are up and running. But I just don't see a lot happening with transportation funding and regulation.
We're trying to create an atmosphere where rail companies were more willing to come to the table and talk about safety and Minnesotans' problems with the railroads. The cooperative power companies were down last week, and they were telling us that if they have to cross a railroad track, they have a substantial cost to them at every single crossing that they have to make their lines cross the railroad tracks, and they pay that to the rail companies. And it's just multiplying and getting bigger and bigger, and they can...
Is that for crossing their right-of-ways?
Yes. And they're not, they get higher and higher bills. What had been $200 once is now up to $5,000 in some cases. And they can't keep their rates down for electricity if they have higher railroad costs. So that's one issue, is the right-of-way that the railroads have and have been granted since the 1860s, and they got for free from the United States government. And much of what railroads are governed by is not state law, but federal law. And so they kind of think we only have to talk about our federals kind of thing, and they're not as willing to come and converse. And we're trying to make it so that they do, because this is one problems in rural Minnesota that we have all over, and I see it every Monday morning in the sense that I try to leave so I won't hit the two trains at Adolph. Not hit. I would never do that. But I mean, I can miss the two trains at Adolph. There's one track right at Adolph, and then half a mile or a mile down the road, there's another one down by the St. Louis River.
On the Midway Road.
Yep, yes. And if there are two trains in the same time period there, you know, that's with the length of the trains now, up to 200 cars or so, that could be as much as 40 minutes at a time, depending on how fast they were going. If one started when the other one stopped, and on it went. And what if somebody has an emergency? How do they get help then? Where does the ambulance go if somebody is coming out of Duluth to get there, or somebody coming out of the Cloquet to get to somebody that needs emergency assistance? I think about that like I said, every single Monday morning when I'm going down to St. Paul.
So there's some complex issues with railroads in Minnesota.
That's right, and we have to talk more about what the problems are, and representatives and senators have been listening, and people have been telling, and we want more conversation with the companies.
All right, Representative Schultz, Clayton from Chisholm was listening to our conversation about the Medicaid liens, and he's wondering, who do you voice your concerns to about Medicaid and the lien it puts against home ownership? Or is that going to be a moot point maybe by the end of this session?
Hopefully it'll be a moot point, but they can definitely reach out to me and share their stories and their concerns, and I answer all my emails and try to accommodate all constituents, even folks that aren't in my district. So definitely reach out to me by email or by phone, and we can follow up and hear their story and try to fix their problem.
And that information is available if you have internet access. You go to the Minnesota House website, and all the committee, or I should say, all the members' contact information is listed there.
Yep.
Or if not, you can call the state house, and they'll put you through. So. All right, Lisa from Lakeside is a question for Representative Schultz. She's wondering, do you think it was appropriate to vote on the citywide citywide on Lakeside liquor? And also, where is that bill in the legislative process?
Sure. So I looked at the precincts that were in Lakeside, and whether it was appropriate or inappropriate for a citywide, that wasn't my vote. But I definitely looked at the precincts, and it was much closer in Lakeside and the surrounding precincts by the business district in Lakeside. And I know Representative Simonson did the same. And then I held a open town hall meeting in Lakeside and took feedback from those who would be affected. And I also made phone calls, over 100 phone calls, to individuals that would be affected in that neighborhood, and tried to understand what their concerns were. And I worked with the city to try to address those concerns. So it's going to be, if it is allowed to go through, it's going to be very restrictive policy of which establishments can sell alcohol and about new liquor licenses. So I've been assured that it's very restrictive district area in certain places, because you can only locate establishments that sell alcohol not near schools or churches. And in Lakeside, where the business district is, it's very limited. So my sense was that more people were supportive of it, even though they voted no, once that information was conveyed to them. And those assurances were made. And the bill right now, it's was dropped in the Senate. It hasn't gotten a hearing in Commerce, because right now we're not putting together a bill for liquor licenses. Usually that's done during budget sessions and not during bonding sessions. We dropped it in the House last week, and I doubt that will get a hearing. The only way to get that through is to amend it to other bills on the floor of the House, and I'm not sure we're going to have that opportunity. So I know some businesses like Amity Creek Coffee want to turn that into a wine bar. They're interested in serving wine. And then New London Cafe, I think, wants to sell beer and alcohol for dinner. So those would be two establishments that would benefit. And I really want, establishments that survive, that are owned locally, that people can walk to. And I see these wonderful, thriving neighborhoods in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, that have very restrictive licenses and locally owned establishments that the community has enjoyed. And then a lot of younger people are moving into Lakeside and want to walk to a restaurant and maybe have a glass of wine. So I want to support those businesses. I want those businesses to thrive. But I don't know if it's going to happen this session. It'll probably happen next session.
And wasn't it the Lester Park Golf Course also part of that? Is that also one of the places that would have off-sale liquor? Yeah,
we introduced that legislation last session, and it passed, so they can serve.
So that is already
beer.
Passed.
That's already passed,
right.
And I haven't heard any problems with the golf course so far.
Now, this might be a good time to bring up too that you serve on the subcommittee on licensing. Talk about that. What does that committee do?
So this is a subcommittee from Health and Human Services Reform, and we look at licensures for provider groups.
Okay.
So we're looking at doulas being licensed. Athletic trainers are requesting to be licensed and increase their scope of practice, which has been very controversial with the physical therapists and athletic trainers. I'm trying to have those two groups work together before they bring me another bill. Lactation license for lactation specialists. So a lot of folks that want to be licensed, and one of the problems is that Medicaid won't reimburse unless they're licensed. So a lot of these folks want to get reimbursed for their services. Like doulas actually save a lot of money in our healthcare system, and they offer a lot of prenatal care.
What a doula is for people who don't know.
So a doula helps individuals who are pregnant and helps them get ready for the new child and take care of themselves and prepare, and they're there in the delivery room, or if it's a home delivery. So they're very instrumental in helping the mother adjust and take care of herself and the new baby. And we found that when people use doulas, they actually have a healthier pregnancy, better prenatal care, and better health outcomes for the mother and the child. So right now they're not licensed, and they've been having a very difficult time getting reimbursed by the health plans. And so 2 years ago, they passed legislation that said that they should be getting reimbursed. That didn't happen. And so the barrier they thought was getting licensed and getting reimbursed. So those are we heard a lot of bills in the subcommittee of provider groups that wanted to get licensed.
Now, I'm not sure if this question will pertain to your committee, but a viewer from St. Louis County is wondering how come social workers don't have to be licensed to take your children away?
So to get licensed in Minnesota, there's very strict guidelines and in state statute. And to get licensed, the first requirement is that you could harm someone. So it's to prevent someone from being physically or mentally harmed. And if they potentially could do harm, they need to get licensed because they need to be regulated and reviewed and evaluate to make sure that they're providing safe services that won't harm anyone. So I don't know if you can make the argument that social workers would actually do harm, physical or mental. Maybe they could make that argument. And if that's the case, I haven't seen any bills coming forward to license social workers, but it's something that we can definitely look at.
Okay, and the viewer didn't leave a name, but maybe if they're interested, they could contact their legislator.
Definitely.
Representative Murphy, Sandra from Eastern Aitken County is wondering, what is happening with the bill that would curtail local government control? Or I haven't heard of a bill like that. Is that a bill that's out there that you're aware of? Anything that would curtail local government control that you're aware of?
I don't, it would have to be more specific and
Okay.
for me to have heard
There
of
were
that.
no more specifics than that. So Representative Schultz,
I
anything?
can't recall anything right now.
Okay. Representative Schultz, you serve on the House Agriculture Committee. This week the committee approved a bill that would provide money for urban farming. Tell us about urban farming.
So this is great. This is something that it is strange that I do serve on the Ag Policy Committee. So I've been very focused on urban agriculture, and which is thriving in Duluth. And so we're trying to get money for a greenhouse in the west end of Duluth, which they're getting a hearing this week. And Representative Karen Clark is carrying the urban ag bill. And this would do studies and to help support the infrastructure to do urban agriculture, which helps with job development, skills for young individuals, takes them off the streets and gets them doing something very productive. And there's been great models in Milwaukee that people have been successful at. And it provides a way, an opportunity for locally grown, locally distributed organic food, healthy food, and to get healthy food into grocery stores. So they've been successful in Northwest Minnesota, Bluebird Farms, in getting healthy, organically grown food into small grocers because out there wasn't a lot of good access to healthy food. And to get healthy food into food deserts in Duluth is also important. So the bill would study the benefits of urban agriculture in terms of providing healthy food to food desert areas and also as a job development curriculum. And then I had a bill that would help promote local food distribution. So a lot of our farms, like Food Farm and others, have CSAs, community supported agriculture, and people would pick up a box and get their produce. But we want a way for those farmers to expand the district, their distribution area, and get food to a local distribution center to package, to clean, to wash, to freeze, and get that distributed more widely. So this would really just help promote local farming, organic farming, and sustainable farming.
And so, go ahead, Representative Murphy.
In addition to this, for a couple of years now, the middle school children have been exposed to doing a little bit of urban farming through the SHIP program. And in Lake County, Two Harbors and Silver Bay both have had successful programs. And in our area, the rural schools and Lincoln Middle School especially, and Myers-Wilkins have had some gardening work where the children have produced an abundance of good things to eat, and learning about the importance of good food, as Representative Schultz was saying, the tomatoes and the potatoes and how things are grown and how things taste when you just pick them right out of the garden. And
Nothing like fresh veggies.
and that's all part of the urban gardening programs. And so some things have started, and there's a lot more to come.
And Representative Murphy, your district being a little bit more rural than Representative Schultz, I imagine that food desert idea, the idea that people don't live close to good sources of food, is even a bigger problem in your district.
Well, that's true, but you know, even yesterday, I heard of someone that they didn't have a garden, but somebody wanted to have a garden, and they had in their field, and